Sort of a background for this talk is that I believe that when we are discussing passwords, we are giving out password advice. When we are talking about password cracking, which we love to do, we are most of the time focusing on English names and words. A vast majority of all research is heavily leaning towards English. Even me, with Norwegian being my native language, there is a lot less research about that. We had an excellent talk several years ago in Stockholm from somebody living in South Africa talking about exactly that. He said that if you know Swahili as an example, and you can do a very simple password in Swahili, chances are pretty small that the bad guys will be able to crack it because they just don't have a word list in Swahili available. And today, I'm really happy to have back again Dimitri from South Africa and his colleague Ethan. They will be talking about the one with the foreign word list. And I'm not going to say that's a continuation of that previous talk, but again, research into passwords and passphrases that are not necessarily strictly English or using standard English alphabet. So please take it away.
Thank you, Per, and thanks everyone for attending today. Just some background on us. So I'm Dimitri Fosekis. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at BCS Group, which also owns a company called BitCrack Cybersecurity. We're based in South Africa, and we operate throughout Africa, handling cybersecurity, pen testing, assessments, advisory, password auditing, and so forth. So Ethan is one of my colleagues. He's a security consultant from the company, so we'll both be presenting this part today. As Per mentioned, I've done some talks before on passwords, having efficient password lists. But what we wanted to do was look for new and different ways that people are creating their passwords, especially now. And especially since that talk was given, I think you said 7 or 8 years ago. I can't remember how long ago it was. We've also changed a lot of the dynamics around how we enter passwords now. A lot of it is more done on a mobile device than it is, for example, on a keyboard in front of a computer, which is why we're also going to touch on a few things related to entering passwords on a mobile device. But when it comes to foreign word lists, what we wanted to touch on was what makes an efficient word list, right? Very briefly, I'm not going to go into too much detail on that, but it's the reason for why also we want to discuss foreign word lists. Bye-bye English is when we will now start looking at the foreign word lists, the one with the emojis. So coming to the cell phones again, generating passwords on cell phones is very common these days, which means we have a keyboard that can also do emojis now. And that also creates some complexity. Some websites will die a horrible death if you try and use emojis, but some will not. So if those passwords are leaked and there's password hashes up for being cracked, emojis could be in there. And then putting it all together, we'll just show you some brief tools that we created to help you do that. They'll be on GitHub shortly after the talk, and we hope that you'll extend them and work with them and get them to do more. And then, of course, the mandatory cat picture for Per. I hope you like it. Good. So we can now begin. Okay. So what makes an efficient word list? And as I said, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I wanted to highlight actually the opposite. What's not efficient and why we thus want to have these targeted word lists. So big word lists, they're not efficient, right? Especially if you've got slow passwords that you want to crack. If you've got a 25 gig word list and you've got a ton of GPUs and you're cracking MD5, that's great, you'll get through them. Switch to a salted hash, switch to bcrypt, something like that, and your great-grandchildren will still be watching the job running. So we want to create efficient word lists, especially ones in foreign languages. What about numbers in word lists? We want to leave these out as well. And the reason I'm mentioning numbers is because they'll come up in the emoji side as well. We generally don't want numbers in word lists because brute force rules can generate those very quickly. We can append them to words or stick them anywhere in a word list candidate. So there's no point to really having numbers in our word lists, except maybe when we're dealing with emojis, and you'll see why when Ethan does his part. There may be a good point to having your rules output some words with emojis. And the golden word list rule that I've stressed before, all those many years ago, if a rule can do it, your word list shouldn't have it, okay? Because if your word list has all the things your rules could do, instead of using the computational power of your GPU, you're just using text files and hard disk I/O, and it's pointless because you're shoving those planes into GPUs, and you're just doing a glorified comparison rather than getting work done on the processor of a GPU. So try and keep the word list as simple as possible. Let rules do all the work that needs to be done on that. So for the first part, the first technique we're going to look at today is something called transliteration when it comes to foreign word lists. Now, I don't know if any of you have had experience with transliteration, if you've ever had to translate into other languages. You may have come across transliteration. What is it? So according to the dictionary, it's defined as representing or spelling in the characters of another alphabet, right? So it's not translation, it's transliteration, but it can happen after translation, okay? So if I've got a word in one language, I translate it to another language, right? And that language could be, say it is Russian or Arabic or Greek or something without a standard Latin character set. That's all good and well. And we can find many dictionaries on the internet with Russian words, with Greek words, with Arabic words. But what most people do is that they're sitting in front of a keyboard that's got Latin characters, or English, if you want to call it that, but let's call it by the proper name, which is Latin characters. So what do? They think of the word in their home language, but they type it out the way it sounds on the keyboard. That's transliteration. So let's look at an example. If we take the word alphabet, okay, that's what the translation to alphabet is in Russian, okay? Now, a Russian person entering a password on a website may think to themselves, well, let me take this word and rather type it as it sounds, and so I'm not going to enter the Russian characters. So we could have a dictionary with a lot of Russian words in it, some nice Unicode there. You could brute force, if you're using Hashcat or John, Unicode characters. Yes, you might come past this word at some point. But there's a good chance, and we see that a lot in the passwords we crack, that the person didn't actually type it in that character set. What they did, in fact, was they used transliteration, which is here on our next slide. Okay? So they took how the word would sound in their language and they wrote it out in Latin characters. And then they add all the bells and whistles to it. So we can have adding of numbers, we can have special characters, we can have case-sensitive toggling, we can add special characters to it, we can do quite a lot, right? Now, if you were only working off English, this word wouldn't come past in your dictionary, right? Because it's not an English word. Its base started off in Russian, and we see it sounds like the word alphabet, and excuse my Russian pronunciation, but I'm Dimitri, the Greek version, not the Russian one, so my Russian's not good. And alphabet could have been written like that, and thus we would have missed it in our dictionaries if we were trying to crack these passwords. Even if you were brute forcing, okay, we're not assuming that was the password, we're assuming it's going to be a complex one, and something that's got to go through rules to actually be effective. So, how do we generate these words, okay? Because we could do it manually. By manually, I mean you go take Russian word, what does it sound like? How is it pronounced? Okay, let me write that in Latin characters, all right? Like brute forcing bcrypt with a large word list, your great-grandchildren will be doing that work as well. What about dictionary mappings? Not exactly easy because it's long and it's hard. And the other thing is, it may not understand the pronunciation of the word to actually give you an answer, right? So when I'm saying that word in another language like Arabic, Greek, Russian, or Chinese, how does it sound, and how do I get that into English or non-standard characters back into the Latin characters? So we leveraged a service, and both Google and Microsoft offer the service. The Microsoft one just is a lot easier to use. It's called Microsoft's Azure Cognitive Services, and it's actually not designed for this. It's designed for all the fancy things like auto-completion of words on your apps, translation, translating sentences and keeping the right intent in it. But one of the features it does have, and the feature that we're using, is transliteration, where it can take a language like a Russian word or a sentence, give you the translation of that into how it sounds, and then give you the English transliteration, the Latin characters transliteration for that. So if we come back to this slide, right, that word running through Microsoft's cognitive services came out with that. Okay. Now something else to keep in mind is that these characters might not always be what a person will use. What do I mean? What do I mean by that, right? Maybe some of you can pick it up, but if I'm a Russian person and I'm pronouncing alphabet, and I'm now using an English or a Latin keyboard to type alphabet, I might not use an I might use a Y. So it might be ALFAVYT. Okay, we'll touch on that just now, because that means some rules are required in these word lists to get them to be even more effective than just dumping out a bunch of words and using them. So Azure Cognitive Services. Just a warning about this, okay? Like any service out there, especially when you spin up your AWS machines and you do something and you forget about it and then you have to sell your house, something similar might happen here, okay? There's a free tier in Azure where 1 million characters can be transliterated for free. After that, you need to use a paid service, and that's going to bill you per character. So if you take the tool as it is and you shove a 25 gig word list in it, well, it's gonna be a bit expensive.
How did you find out?
Yeah, the hard way. Okay, so it's going to get expensive. What we've done, and I'll get that onto the next slide for you, we've done some things to help you out, and we'll continue putting them on our Git as we go forward. But what I want to show you quickly, if I can just escape from here, is coming to our console here. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to show you the code here. It's very easy to use to go forward. So what you do is you come to the bottom, you'll get yourself a subscription from Microsoft's Cognitive Services. It'll spin up an endpoint for you that you can use. You simply add your location. You add the endpoint using the translate endpoint. This code will be online. You can take it and work with it. And then you go from there. And when we get to looking at the tools, I'll show you what the output for that is. Now, what we did is we took the English dictionary and we shoved it through the service, okay? And it's a two-stage process, but thankfully, Microsoft Cognitive Services returns both in the same reply. So we took English, we said take the English dictionary and convert it to Russian, right? Then how would that Russian be pronounced? Give us the transliteration in Latin characters. And that's when you get output like this now, okay? So it's the English dictionary, and it's obviously the end of it. I'm not showing you the whole thing. It's the English dictionary, and we've translated it, and at the same time taken the pronunciation and transliterated that. And now we have a whole bunch of nice base words to use when we're cracking our passwords. To help you, we've done 3 languages through the engine. I'll put those on GitHub for you. You can use them as base words, and you can extend it further. Obviously, like I mentioned, be careful, because once you pass the free tier, your credit card is going to start being billed for the output coming out of this. It's not overly expensive. I'm just saying, just keep an eye on what you're doing. And the reason I mention rules are so important is never ever give this your dictionary with a whole bunch of junk in it, right? Because if you give Azure aeroplane 123, Azure is going to say, well, this looks like a spelling mistake. I'm sure you meant aeroplane, right? Now, say you've got 1,000 of those. You've actually paid to translate the same word 1,000 times, because Azure is going to either give an error, or it's going to say, I think you meant this, and it's going to give you the word. So you're actually duplicating work. So make sure the input dictionaries into the cognitive services, when you use these tools, are very base dictionaries. They have nothing extra added to them, so that it can just give you the raw output of what it sounds like when transliterated into English. After that, there's some rules you can consider, like I mentioned, and we'll put these up on the GitHub as well. Okay, because people are not Microsoft's cognitive services, right? They think differently, they get into habits. So someone who is Russian maybe and typing these words on an English keyboard the way they sound may not use an I where it should be, they used a Y instead. Maybe they didn't use a K, they used a C instead. So now you don't want word lists with this, because like I mentioned, you want your word list to remain efficient and fast. But you want rules to plug into your password cracking, offload it to your GPU, let it do all the hard work here of figuring out all these iterations of what the person could have typed while they were busy with it. In case you forgot or you don't know, okay, this is a standard hashcat rule. The S means replace X with Y. So replace a Y with an I. Replace an I with a Y, replace a C with a K. I'm sure you get the drift. You can build on these. We have done quite a lot of this, so I'll publish those on Git for you as well. What we've done in the various languages is we've looked at what people could have used, right? So for example, Greek. If you're translating the word Greek, say drink in Greek is poto, all right? So poto could be P-O-T-O when written on a Latin keyboard. But Greeks have the Omicron and the Omega, which looks like a W. So the person could maybe have used a W instead of an O. But the cognitive engine won't know that. It'll give you P-O-T-O as the output. And so these rules will then come in handy to fix those minor things where just humans have changed it by using a character that could have been something else. So that covered the first technique. The second technique we're going to look at is keyboard walks with a difference when it comes to foreign languages. And this is an interesting one because I didn't realize how often it actually gets used. But it's used quite a lot, not really on cell phones and tablets, but certainly on computer keyboards, and keyboards where people type. Okay, a normal keyboard walk is not what we're talking about, right? I'm sure those of you in the know will know what a keyboard walk is. You have a pattern. You don't know the password. You know the pattern on the keyboard, right? So I go, and a password comes out of it, okay? And these various tools that can do that. Hashcat's got a few. Others have a few, right? Not complex. There are many ways to do that. But how does it tie into foreign word lists, right, if the person's used that? Well, we're going to look at a keyboard now. It's called the Bapoma keyboard. It's a Chinese keyboard, one of the many Chinese keyboards out there. There's simplified ones. There's non-simplified ones. There's a whole lot of different ones. But what we're going to do now is we're going to look at a keyboard walk based on the assumption that two things have happened. Either the person typed the word in Chinese but left the keyboard set in English, or typed the word in English and left the keyboard set in Chinese, right? So what happens then is, I'm thinking of the word password, right? So I'm a Chinese person, I speak English and speak Chinese, and I think, let me type password in. But I'm going to be clever, as it were, and what I'm going to do is I'm not going to leave the keyboard in English. I'm going to set the keyboard to Chinese and then type the word password. Now, if we do that and we press a P and an A and an S and an S and a W and O and R and a D, that's what comes out in characters. Okay? It means nothing. You can't translate it. It's not a word, right? It looks pretty random. And if you came across that in a hashes you were trying to crack, you may look at it and think, but when I'm trying to translate it, it's not working. That's because the original word was actually thought of in a different language, but it was typed on a multi-language keyboard with it set in the other language. So the person hit the right keys, but the keyboard entered what each one of it in the Chinese simplified is, and that's what came out as characters. And then they might add their fancy things like a few exclamation marks or we know users. It's not complicated. Chances are it was at August 22 or something. But the fact is that this is pretty random from our point of view. And the opposite could be true, right? The person could have thought of the word in Chinese, but typed it on this keyboard set to English, in which case it'll look like gibberish to you, but there's actually words. So what we've done is we built a tool that will also be on GitHub, and it's going to take a few of these keyboards and say, okay, give me the input language, and I'll show you what would have been output if the person entered it in that language but set the keyboard to its actual language, or the other way around. And so you would get a nice word list filled with these random characters, as it were, even though they're not actually random characters. So those were the two techniques I've covered for you now. The transliteration, which is how does it sound in that language, but I'm typing it in Latin characters, right? Very common. So when I crack some hashes using those base words, it does crack a few of the open stuff that you can find lying around on the internet. Remember to think about the target, right? So if it's a Russian website where you've got hashes that you're legally obtained and you're trying to crack them, okay, you're not going to use Chinese transliteration as much as you are going to use Russian. You can if you want to, but I'm saying give it some thought as well when you're working out that. And then on the keyboards, think about your targets as well, because it could be that it's an Arabic keyboard, right? But the person thought in English, but typed it in Arabic mode on the keyboard. And so we got a bunch of Arabic gibberish, which actually makes sense if you looked at what was typed when they walked the keyboard. So up next, we're going to introduce Ethan, and he's going to take us through the one with the emojis.
The one with the emojis. So why do we need to account for emojis in our password lists? Well, for starters, there's increasing support for it. On our mobile phones, we've had emojis for ages. And we're seeing now in Windows 11, they've just released an emoji keyboard. Macs also had it for a while. So a lot of devices have support for emojis. So it's no longer the case where you'd maybe make a password on your phone, and then when you get to your desktop, it wouldn't work because there's no emoji support there. Also, our heavy use of our mobile phones. Everyone has a mobile phone, and using emojis has become part of our lives. We use it in our text messages. It's really become part of our language, so it's only natural that it would also become part of our passwords as well. Again, a lot of accounts are only used on our mobile devices. If we think about things like Instagram, TikTok, Uber, they're all accounts that we only use on our mobile devices where we have emojis. And then there are a lot of emojis, over 3,600 emojis in Unicode standard. So this is a very, very large character set that we need to take account of when we do our passwords. Perfect. So what does our tool do? Well, our tool works on the assumption that people will use emojis in phrases in their passwords. You can generate a random list of the most frequently used emojis and use that to try crack some passwords. But what our tool does is it will take a phrase, for example, I love my dog hashcat, and then the plain text password of that could be I love my dog hashcat 2022, altogether without spaces. And then the emojified password of that would be I, beating heart, my dog emoji, hash emoji, etc., etc. There were a couple of challenges that we faced when making this tool. First off, there's a lot of emojis. For example, the word love could have well over 20 different emojis related to that specific word. Could have the heart emoji, the blue heart emoji, heart eyes, kissy face, all those different ones could portray the word love. And same with things like dog. So what we had to do is generate all those different combinations. And someone might have only used one emoji in their password. They might have used two, they could have used three, etc., etc. So with this tool, we really try to generate all the different possible emojis with this, or passwords with this. Well, that does mean that you're going to end up with a word list that's quite big if you don't have a really specific input file with just a couple words or phrases. Another challenge was the different skin tones. If we think about just the thumbs up emoji or good emoji, there are 5 different other skin tones, and we need to take account of that as well. And how it works with emojis and things like skin color or color is there's actually 2 different Unicode characters. We have one Unicode character for the thumbs up, and then the next Unicode character for the color brown. And combined, they generate the brown thumbs up emoji. So we also generated that in our tool. Tool inputs. So our tool can take in a variety of inputs. Can take in something like a book or a Wikipedia page about someone, some sort of article. And we're also using engrams to do this. And what an engram is a collection of n number of words or sample text with the highest probability of what the word will be next. So for example, I've got the Wikipedia page of Formula 1 driver Max Verstappen. And in there, we can see that after the word Max, the most common word that would come after that would be Verstappen. And then when he was born 30 September, and so on and so forth. So you could feed it anything from a book or a Wikipedia page and generate passwords like that. Another thing it can take in is just a text file of passwords. So you might have in your password list something like I love my dog hashcat 2022. You would have to have the numerical value in there, otherwise it won't get transferred into emoji. And then our tool will just split that up into the different words in there. So I love my dog, and then I'll change all the those words into emojis. So options for the tool, obviously just the in file option, the file you want to take as input for it, out file, spaces. You can choose if you want to have spaces in between the words, or if you just like them all stuck together. Numbers, if you'd only like to emojify the numbers in your password, you can also choose to do that. Subchar substitutes all available characters instead of just the words. So for a password like foxmoon19, there's emoji for the character for the letter O, for X, for M, and what that will do is it'll just generate foxmoon with all those characters being emojis, and it'll also generate all the different combinations of that. -n, this is for if you're using engrams for something like a book or an article. And then -n is just the number of engrams, the depth that you want to go to. So just for a quick demonstration, oh yeah, escape. Okay, cool. That's fine. Is my thing on there? Okay, capital. Good. So just go to our tool, python.main. Can I have our input file? I think it's just, yeah, and then our out file. Okay, cool, I'll do that. So this would just change all of the words in that text file into an emoji. So for just examples, we can look at what our input was. Wait. Sorry. Apologies, it's very difficult to see up here. So that would just be our example file. I'm a fan of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, so I put that in there. And then the outputs. Is it in? And you see our out file. So there would be our output file of all the different emojis and all the different combinations. Where's it gone? Of all the different combinations of that word, and I can't zoom in. Let's zoom. And they'll go through all the different combinations of that, just with the emojis in there. Cool. Handing back to Dimitri.
Okay, just so you can see it a bit clearer. Okay, so if you go back to the beginning. Okay, so that's what it took with Red Hot Chili Peppers. Okay, so obviously it's going to iterate, as Ethan mentioned, through the different options of what could be Red Hot, right? Okay. Lost the mouse cursor. Okay, and as we go down, we get to the next one. Okay. So, as Ethan mentioned, it can get complex with emojis because different people use emojis to mean different things, right? Okay, like when I'm happy, I might use an emoji with a smiley face. Someone else may think thumbs up means I'm okay, so I'm happy. So we have to iterate a lot based on intent as well, which does make the file bigger. But depending on what hash you've got, it can get through them quite fast. You can also use std out on the tool and pipe it straight into hashcat, so you don't even have to generate the wait for the word list to generate either. I'm just going to exit this quickly. Okay, so if we come back to our slides where we were. Okay, so putting it all together. So we've had a look at the one with the emojis. We've had a look at the keyboard walks. So looking at transliteration, right? If I have a file, let's call it test1.txt, okay? And we put some words in there, base words that we want in our dictionary. So let's take aeroplane, let's take potato. Someone give me some words. Nouns. Garden. Garden. Let's do one more. Dancing. Dancing. Password. Okay. Good. Okay. So what we'll do then is we will call our tool, right? And we're going to say that the in file is test1. Okay, we give it an out file, test1.out. Okay, and then we give it the language. So what I want to do is I want to make this, let's take Arabic, right? AR. So I'm asking the cognitive translator, translate it to Arabic. How does it sound if I speak it in Arabic and give me that in Latin characters? And hopefully if it works, we should get some output here. Okay, so there we have some output. I'm not sure if it's big enough to see. Okay, so what it did is it translated aeroplane to Tyra. My Arabic is also not good, right? So if I'm pronouncing it wrong, forgive me. But so it took the word, translated it out, and then gave you what it would sound like. again, the tool will be on GitHub, and take it and change it, make it better, get it for what you want it to do. There's no threading, for example. The reason I didn't put threading in is because I was worried that might burn my credit card even more than than it has already. But yeah, so just be careful, because if it goes wide, Microsoft's going to be smiling at you with the amount of or what you're doing. But like I mentioned, we will over time be translating base dictionaries for you into these. So just visit the GitHub page every so often, which, like, if I go back to here, so it's not there yet. Don't visit it yet. We haven't copied the stuff over. But from this evening or tomorrow, if you visit it, I will tweet it out as well. You can then visit it, and we'll start putting this stuff up there, and you're welcome to fork all the tools and create your own, change them as you want to, and do that. So that's how we covered foreign word lists. I'd like to thank everyone. Also, some of the stuff we've done has been studied before. We're just changing the way we're adapting it. So we've got some people to thank for research and stuff that they've done as well. The Word Ninja, Emoji Translate, the Natural Language Toolkit, Hashcat, of course. Those people whose names I don't want to destroy. And then, yeah, for Microsoft Azure Cognitive Services. I'm thanking them for taking my money. Thank you very much. But the service is good, and it works well. Like I mentioned, there is a Google one as well. If you want to play with that one, we're not using it in our tool, but you can also play with the Google one as well. Give it a try, see what it's like, and you can build off that. Thank you very much.
Questions for Dimitri and Ethan?
Sure. While they're asking, I'll put it back up.
I have a question. In my language, we have a Danish character called Ø. And if you try to write that in English, often Danish people will type O and E. So do you take that into consideration, that one character could become more characters?
Yes. So what we're doing, I'll quickly come here to this one. Okay. It will fall under here with the rules. Okay. We didn't do Danish rules, but thanks for the info. We'll add those as well. You can also, yeah. I mean, there's nothing to stop you doing it. In fact, it's better if the person who speaks the language does it, because like I know in Greek what we often transliterate to, right? I might not know in Danish. So, but do it under rules so that you don't have to cater for it in all your word list output. Someone wanted this one, I think. I'm just going to add the Twitter account as well while you're asking questions, so that we can also.
Yeah. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Can you say anything about any success rates you've had with this? I mean, the tool is awesome, the concept is awesome, but have you been able to crack like one more hash, or are we talking? What are we talking about? How much have you improved your password cracking capability with this?
So we did crack a few hashes on some publicly available lists. We didn't try to target them specifically, so we didn't actually create the word lists we created were more for the talk than for actual word lists, targeted lists out there. We tried them on a few from the Hashkiller website, but again, it's too vast to actually know what they could have been. They were uncracked hashes that some of the password crackers have tried and didn't get, and a few cracked out of that. Where I would see it working a lot better is in a corporate environment. So if you get NTLM hashes, especially in corporate environments where they've got the multiple keyboards, pretty sure you'll see quite a bit of that. And you'll see it if you can get hold of hashes. Well, let me add the disclaimer: if you can legally get hold of hashes from websites with mobile registration, you'll come across a lot of emojis on there. Like Ethan mentioned, although the keyboards are available in Windows and Mac, I don't think the uptake is as high as when they're creating them on the mobile devices.
Your example of the keyboard walks is something that I actually saw when I was cracking passwords legally in Ukraine like 15 years ago. So people were doing that back then. They thought of something in Russian or Ukraine, and they sort of looked at the Cyrillic characters, but they actually typed in what became English characters into the system. And to me, it was complete nonsense until I realized what they were actually doing. Yeah. More questions?
I think there's a question probably more for Ethan. Some of the conversions to emojis that you had ended up being very short, like I love my dog could be I heart dog. Do you have, and I'm wondering if websites and so forth are counting the minimum password length wrong. You know, if it's supposed to be 8 characters, are they counting, you know, each emoji as like 4 or something like that because that's its length in Unicode?
Well, it depends. So a lot of the emojis are just a single character, a single Unicode character. But then again, some of them with like different colors and stuff, it's two characters. Right. It'll see it as 2 characters.
But even the emojis that are a single character, it takes multiple bytes to represent that. So yes, it might be a 4-byte long Unicode character to represent that emoji.
Yes, but it'll still be only seen as 1 character.
Okay, yeah, I'm hoping that they're seeing it as 1 rather than 4. Otherwise, you're going to get some really probably easy to crack 2-character
yes,
passwords.
Yes. Cool.
Sorry, just to add to that. So what I think a lot of websites are doing as well is that they're taking the input, if it's Unicode, they're then catering for, okay, it's Unicode, so don't look at the actual Unicode itself, but work out how many characters I've got in Unicode rather than how many plain text with the actual Unicode written out as U1 or whatever the hex value is for that.
Okay, so thank you again, Dimitri and Ethan. Great talk. Now there will be a break until 5 o'clock. Some changes are coming. Jeremy Gosney couldn't come and he had to cancel his talk. And magic happened. So he is now at a hotel. And hopefully he will do his talk, passwords, but make it nihilism. At 5 o'clock, I will gladly skip my talk for listening to him. So I really hope that you will be back at 5 o'clock, and I will go look for Jeremy right now. Thank you.